Hey, it's the Empire, Geoboxing Empire, Baxter Boxing. Now, man, big news, man. Danny Garcia and Errol Spence Jr., Errol the Truth Spence, they were interviewed by PBC Boxing, Premier Boxing Championship. And, after the car accident, Errol Spence talks about what he went through. And apparently, man, Errol Spence Jr. blew up to the 190s when he got in a car accident, which is an extremely big deal. And not only that, he talked about how even months later after the car accident, how his hips are still hurting, right? The video is only like 4 minutes long. You guys can watch it. But this says a lot. A lot of people were talking about, a lot of people were talking about how serious were Errol Spence Jr.'s injuries, right? When the injuries came out, they said it was the equivalent of taking a 12-round fight, right, at the highest level in boxing, right? It was like Errol Spence Jr. being in a 50-50 fight and barely getting a split decision, maybe even an L. That's how they said this car accident was on his body and the damage he took. That being said, man, I don't know, but let me know of the fight that a fighter took that affected him 3-4 months later, or at least 3 months later after the fact. I can't name one. So I think the car accident, the injuries sustained by Errol Spence Jr., they were really they're underplayed, man. They're underplayed, and Errol Spence Jr. confirms that months after the fight, he couldn't do things like run because his hips hurt, and he blew up in weight. This is a really big deal, man. A lot of times in boxing, when people are training for these top level fights, I always talk about how they'll have instead of a training camp, they'll have a fat camp. So they'll take all this time getting down in weight instead of actually focusing on their boxing skills. So they won't really be as sharp as they could be. Now, I'm not too sure how quickly Errol Spence Jr. can lose weight, but we've seen him in between fights blow up in weight and just look too big. I'm not too sure what his weight is right now, but I'm guessing most of his camp was a fat camp before he actually started training on his boxing. And if you didn't know, man, Danny Garcia is an extremely well-versed counterpuncher, right? The guy is always looking to counter you. He's always looking for that left hook. And you need to be in your A game, because if you're just getting in shape to the point where all you did is get in shape, but you didn't hone your boxing skills, that can definitely affect you in one of the biggest fights in Errol Spence Jr.'s career. Now, this is a really big deal because, like I said earlier, we're going to see how this whole thing unfolds. A lot of people are assuming Errol Spence Jr. at 100%, which he clearly is not at 100%, right? Errol Spence Jr. gets more in depth with Danny Garcia's style as well. He says Danny Garcia only has one gear, and that's to counterpunch. He said Danny Garcia peaked out at 140. He said at 140 he was a good fighter, but since then, you only have one gear now. And as of now, these last opponents you've been fighting, you've been not looking so fantastic, right? It was sort of crazy. Danny Garcia said he was unmotivated and content with life, and that's why he didn't really look as great as he did, and took those L's. And it was a back and forth between Errol Spence Jr. and Danny Garcia. Now, it's wild stuff because Errol Spence Jr. seems to really know Danny Garcia very well. When Danny Garcia first went to 147, everyone wanted to fight him. Everybody wanted to fight him, right? Errol Spence Jr. seems to be well studied on Danny Garcia because he knows all of his weaknesses. He knows the guy only has one mode of attack, which is counterpunching. It's extremely rare for Danny Garcia to be elusive as far as attack and being he's mostly a counterpuncher. He's not trying to overwhelm you. He's not trying to outbox you. He's mostly trying to put you to sleep. He's trying to knock you out, right? And that being said, I think Errol Spence Jr. is right on that fact that as of now in Danny Garcia's career, he's very one-dimensional. He's not doing a lot of things in the ring. He's trying to really just catch you with counters and left hooks, and he's only throwing power shots. So this is going to be a really big deal, man. Danny Garcia, like I said earlier, he said he's talking about how he was just not motivated, and his 140 days were great, but after that, he was so accomplished at 140. When he went to 147, he thought it was a done deal, basically, and who he is now as a fighter, he didn't really have to grow, and that's what kept him stagnant, That's what kept him stagnant. He actually even admitted in the interview that there's some days he could have went harder in the gym, and he sort of gave like a meh, approach to training. Like I said, just like a 70% in the gym sometimes, and he didn't go all the way hard. You guys should really watch the interview. It's on PBC Championships. Really interesting stuff, man. Now this fight's gonna be a really big fight, man. I think Danny Garcia, people are sleeping on him, and I think that Errol Spence Jr. is actually more hurt than when people give him. I think he's hurt. I think he still is suffering a little, a tweak here and there from that car accident. I don't think he's 100%. And I think that Danny Garcia has a really good chance. Now, will Danny win? Oh, who knows? But I think Errol Spence Jr. definitely has his work cut out for him in fighting Danny Garcia. I just think the cards are stacked against Errol Spence as far as dropping a massive amount of weight and suffering a car accident. This is a good time for Danny Garcia to fight Errol Spence Jr. And you know what? I think Danny Garcia is seeking an opportunistic moment, because Danny Garcia has never been interested in fighting Errol Spence Jr., not that I'm aware of. And now all of a sudden he's fighting him out of nowhere. I think this is a chess move. This is a chess move by Danny Garcia to fight Errol Spence Jr. So we're going to see how this whole thing plays out, man. I think this is going to be a good fight. People are sleeping on this fight. They're just counting Danny out. Mistake. Let me know how you guys feel about it, though. Like, comment, subscribe. This is The Empire. Geoboxing Empire. Peace.